Alrighty, welcome back. So today we're talking about faders, what they are, how they've been used in the hobby, why I personally don't like them, and what alternatives can we use to avoid some of the issues that come along with faders. So starting off, we have the Medieval classic fader, Midas fade, Red Devil's fade. This is just a Medieval. They're used in Super Red Texas, gold bases, and parrots, right? I think basically any fader you've seen in the hobby comes from an amp base, right? Either Midas or Red Devil in some facet, right? Parrots are amp to Veja, Super Red Texas, and Red Texas are parrot to Texas. Gold base in some facet have amp in them from Midas and Red Devil to fade. And what does that entail? I don't really like faders because most of the time they have inconsistent colors, right? I feel like a lot of people will get into Super Red Texas hoping they get this coloration. This is great if you do the steps for it. Most people are not willing to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They want to do, I bought a Super Red Texas, I want it to breed it to this, I want it to come out red. Most of the time it's not. Let's just be honest. It's going to come out like this sometimes, which they'll be like, oh, this is a masterpiece. I want to keep that, personally. This right here, this is a good fish. It's not a fader, but it has actual red skin. So this has genetics to put out red skin, which if you bred it to a Cynogatus and like kind of selectively bred it a couple generations, you could get like a color base like this, but with smaller purling. And instead of the purling being white from the fader, you would have blue purling, which I personally like the blue purling. I personally like blue purling. I personally like red skin over just a fader, especially with how inconsistent faders are. So let's go down to what does Midas look like without a fader? This is such a crucial thing inside of all of mixes. What does it look like, right? Here you go. Every single time you breed anything like a fader, it has this within it. Especially parrots. Like, I don't know how to break it through people's heads. This is what it has. This is what it has. This is a Midas without the fader gene. Personally, ugly. Personally, I wouldn't be breeding this to anything in my collection. But people get so caught up in the fader that they're like, this is amazing. Because, with the fader, what does it look like, right? I have to show it because some people will play stupid. Oh my god. Here we go. Let's just show it off. So we've got unfaded and faded. Unfaded and faded. People will look at the faded one and be like, wow, it brings so much color to the table. This is going to change everything. What color? This is the color it brings to the table, people. This is the color. When you're wondering why your Red Texas and F1 come out but brown or green or any color that's not orange, yellow, or red, it's this. Now, obviously, you're praying that it gets the fader. You're like, well, Jackson, I'm going to be a responsible breeder, and I'm going to cull off all the ones that don't fade or don't have my pearl profile and don't have X, Y, and Z, and I'm only going to keep the faders. The other issue I have with faders is they don't breed consistently. They're not a dominant mutation. They're not a recessive mutation. They're not a polygenic mutation. They're not something that's easily accessible. So if you breed a Midas to a Texas, or a parrot to a Texas, or a gold base to another flower horn, or any facet of fader, you're not guaranteed faders in the next generation. You expect faders in the next generation. Usually we can expect about maybe 1% to 30%, depending on how much Midas is in it. And the more Midas you have, the more this you have. This is not great. This is not fantastic for hybrids. It's going to do so much more damage than benefit just for this trait that you want, right? And they're going to be like, well, I could breed out the face, and I can breed the color to be better. The issue is to breed the color to be better, you have to add in Veha, which, what have I said before? Veha Amph makes fertility issues. Veha Amph makes fertility issues. So, you're breeding a fader to something to fix it that's going to cause fertility issues. That's going to make the fixing a lot harder to do. So, if you're to do like Amph to Veha, and then F1 to Veha, so now you have 75% Veha because you wanted to realign the red genetics, you now have a low chance of fading. And you're only at 75% Veha, so you don't have like fantastic fertility rates. So you might get, a low amount of fertile males, but it's not even guaranteed. Say you get a batch of 100 and you raise them up and you only get like 20 to adulthood, and then you sell off a couple, and now you have 3 or 4 adults holding back and none of them are fertile. That's not beneficial to yourself as a breeder, and it's not beneficial to the community because you're kind of just wasting your time. Let's be honest. Just kind of wasting your time. Now, there are, other facets to this. You're like, well, I'm not going to breed it to Veha. Okay. What are you going to breed it to? Parachromis? Because we already have a fader for Parachromis. We do. And so we don't have to add Amph. Because when you add Amph, you're adding this. So you don't have to add this to the Veha, or the Parachromis. You're like, well, I'm going to breed it to Veha. We technically have a fader for Veha. It's garbage. I'm going to tell you it later on in the video, but it's garbage. But this and Red Devil, which I could show you Red Devil as well, which I probably should. We're going over it. This and this one. Oh, it's ugly. These ones are better, but not fantastic. But Red Devil, right? Red Devil and Midas are the base of almost every single fader you see in hybrids. Almost every single fader you see in hybrids are based off of this. This is garbage. I would never use this in a hybrid. I know I've already said it. I would never use this in a hybrid. I personally would never use this in a hybrid. If I wanted fader, I'd use something completely different. So let me show you your options. You're like, well, Jackson, you really ruined fader for me. I like faders. I like orange fish, and I wanted to breed it to a heavy Veha. But I can't realign the fader genetics, and it keeps lowering percentages, and I'm getting 1 to 2% fade rate, even that. Luckily for you guys, Midas and Red Devil are not the only faders in Central America. Boom! Right? They're not the only things. So why, as a hobby, are we continually using base fish that are ugly? Make it make sense. We have, let's see, what is the first one? That's Medevil. Garbage. Again, because underneath this glowing orange, slightly red fish is this at the end of the day. And you could stack it on stuff and everything. It's not going to be fantastic. First one I want to hit, Red Dovi. Red Dovi is a fader. Let me hit a couple things about Red Dovi. It is not axanthic. It is a type of fader. You have inconsistent fading, like an Amph. But the benefit is this one doesn't decrease the fertility within Veha or heroic thighs, but also it increases purling because the Midas sometimes decreases purling. So you have better fertility and better purling right off the bat. Which, oh, Jackson, what would I pair it up to? What would I pair a Dovi up to? Blah, 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 blah. Let's look. Because I have a whole Dovi section. Right? I know I have a Dovi F2 Jaguar that's red. This F1, this is an F1 bred by Chong He. in the United States, F1 red Dovi jaguar. When you breed F1 to F1, you get this, F2 red Dovi jaguar, which, look at it. This is pretty fantastic, honestly. No AMF in it. It's not going to mess up fertility when you breed it to Veha. It's not going to, there's a lot of benefits to this, and it has purling already. Already has purling. Benefit right there. Like, well, I want to breed it to Veha. Look at Dovi Sin. Red Dovi to a Sin, or a Super Red Sin, or a Diablo Super Red Sin, or 7 Blood. Holding up. Holding up. 2, 3. It's glitching. Or a 7 Blood Sin. Could be fantastic. If we're getting faders like the red Jaguar in F2, they look good. And something to say about the red Dovi. In F1 of the Jaguar, so it's red Dovi to Jaguar, it was about a 45% fade rate, which is a much higher fade rate than you usually get with pure AMF to a hybrid. The other thing about it is in F2, it was fader to fader, and it was a 70% fade rate, which you almost never see an increase in F2, which means there's something going on with the Dovi that could possibly prove out to be a better base, not just for fertility, not just for purling, but for higher fade rates in the long term of your hybrid projects. But let's talk about these. If you were to add red Dovi to a Sin and then breed to F2, you have a higher chance of realigning the red alleles of the Sin genetics to get red skin back on with the fader over it to have a better chance of getting a red fader. Pretty straightforward. Now, the second one we have, I would like to open up the photo for that one. The Catamaco fenestratus. I might have said that wrong, but Catamaco, or the pink fin. If it's not labeled Catamaco, do not call it a Catamaco. It's a locality. So if it's labeled as a pink fin, do not go and be like, well, I have a Catamaco. It's not a Catamaco because they've already outcrossed it and hybridized it within other fenestratus localities. If it's labeled pink fin, it's not a Catamaco. Every Catamaco is a pink fin, but not every pink fin is a Catamaco. Understand that? This is the locality it originated from, and then it was later crossed around in the hobby. Now the Catamacos color is rough. It's rough, let's be honest. This is not a fantastic fish. Now if you want a high white, Catamaco could be the fader for you, right? I'm not saying it's fantastic, because it's not fantastic. It's pretty garbage. But let's look at them for a second. Catamaco and pinkfin are different than marble. So every single marble you look here, please just ignore it. That's not what we're looking at. I don't know why they're... Yeah. Here's another. This is a pink fin. This is a pink fin. These two are pink fins. Pink fins with biffas. They're not impressive fish, honestly. Now, one of you guys might be like, wow, those are the nicest fish I've ever seen. You know, you have your own taste. But to me, these are not the best. Now, I should say that they haven't been used a ton in hybrids. So this obviously has some red coming through of it, and it has some facial reds. It could potentially, mixed into like Sin or Biffa and then aligned correctly, it could possibly produce a more red face with a white body. But I would always imagine that the Catamacos faders are going to have a higher percentage of white. But the Dovi fader, still looking good. Still looking good. What else do we have? So we have Medevil, Red Devil, Dovi, Catamaco, which is a Veha, and then we have Red Bay Snook. Red Bay Snook. Now this is kind of a rare cichlid. You don't see them around a ton, and not a lot is known about their fader, which is kind of makes it harder to talk about them, but also makes them exciting to cross because There's a lot of unknowns with them, right? Again, red bay snook. I don't think anybody has successfully hybridized them in F1. I know they've done snook to other stuff, but I don't think anybody has intentionally done snook red bay to anything and then sought after that fader trait. And the only reason I say that is because I haven't seen any faders off of them, and that could lead to two things. One, it could be a fader like Amph and Dovi and Katameko, where every single generation it moves away from the species it was originally on. It lowers and it's upcoming. Well, I guess Dovi doesn't do that, right? But Katameko and Amph both do. But this could be something like that. Or this is a recessive or dominant trait, which if it's a recessive would mean that in F1 no faders come out, but when you breed sibling to sibling, 25% faders would come out. Or if you bred sibling back to parent, 50% of faders would come out. But again, that needs testing. But this one has some pretty nice reds. It would give pearling, and then a deep dive real quick, just a quick cover of snook for hybrids. Snook have pearl reception. This is a jaguar. They have color reception. This is a flower horn. And honestly, since of the color and the pearl reception means that we could use them in Veja, Hericthies, or Perichromis, and more than likely get better color and better pearling if you didn't want to use the red Dovi base. Also, the only issue is since this is completely untested species for this type of thing, is we really can't say that if the snook are going to have great fertility in hybrids. I can tell you that Dovi to Veja is going to have good fertility. I can tell you that Katameko to Veja is going to have good fertility. I can tell you that Katameko to Flowerhorn or Parrot is going to have bad fertility. But snook is very untouched species for hybrids. And I think somebody should touch it. Someone should go touch the boat, Finding Nemo. I think somebody should eventually. I know the face is a little off-putting for some, but if you're working towards a more Perichromis or predatory look, like, oh, I want to bring Grimod and Dovi and Fredistilla and Multifaceta and Locellii and Jaguar and Salvini all together, and you're like, I also want faders. This could be a good one. Unless you're going to use the red Dovi, then use red Dovi. Because, spoiler warning, do not cross faders to faders that are from different lines. Don't take a gold base or a parrot or a super red Texas and cross it to a red Dovi and then try to sell the babies out as a red Dovi fader when you don't know. There's no way of knowing. I've seen people breed Veja faders with the Perichromis faders, and then that's where it gets messy. Because you can't tell them, hey, this is a Perichromis fader, or hey, this is a Veja fader, or hey, this is an Amph fader, because you mixed it up. Which, as me as a breeder and as a buyer and whatever, if I'm going to a breeder and I'm like, hey, I want to get this fader off of you, what are the parents? And you tell me that, oh, one parent was a fader from the Katameko line and one parent is a fader from the Perichromis line, and you bred them together, I don't want to buy that. I don't want to buy that fish anymore. Now, if you bred the red Dovi to a Finistratus, and you're like, hey, here's some faders that are, okay, I'm in again. Or you bred a Katameko to a Perichromis, I'm in again. But the moment you cross the fader to another fader, I'm out. That thing's worthless to me because I don't know which one it is. Honestly, that's not worth it anymore. And, when you're thinking about breeding your faders and everything, also think about your culls. Culling is such a important aspect of the hobby that people just overlook. Cull your culls. Cull your culls. It has a bigger effect than just you. And they're not profitable. Now you're like, I could sell my culls for $10 at the local fish store. Do you really want to do that? You're introducing bad fish into your local market that somebody's going to buy. If they get a female and a male of something else, they're going to breed it. And then they're going to have more culls. Because you produce a cull, and that produced more culls. That person's like, well, I'm not going to cull them off because I can sell them at the local fish store. That produces a loop of stupidity. Just think about it. Think about it. Why would you sell the culls? I can make money off of them. You could also ruin the entire market around your area. I've seen it done a couple times where somebody sold a type of comfa they did where they should have culled off 90% of the comfas they produced, but they sold them, and then people were buying them, and then they were texting me and like, hey, what can this do? That should have been culled off. Is this male fertile? No, that male's garbage. He should have been culled off because he's not a showcase male. He's not a breeding male. He's a cull. But somebody wanted to get a profit off of them. Culling's important. Faders hide bad traits at the end of the day. Faders hide bad traits. You know. You take an ugly fish and turn it solid orange, and suddenly everybody thinks they have a giant, bright orange fish, when in reality, they have a turd covered in an orange sheet. You have super red Texas that you've bred. You bred your SRT to a parrot. Cull them. Not all of them. Maybe keep one or two females, but cull the majority. Do not try to sell those for a profit. Most of the time, they don't turn out good. You're breeding a Texas to a Midas. I'm going to let you know right now, you're going to have to cull most of those because they're not going to be an RT. You want the Veja. You want red skin? You need Veja in the mix. That's why you use parrot. And there's already other better ways to produce a better super red Texas these days than doing straight parrot. But that's for a future video. I'll go over that later on. Big thing is, faders, most fader hybrids come from an amp base. You need to be diligent about what you're letting out in your local market because most of the amps are garbage. Now, for everybody that stayed this long, highly suggest red Dovi, into Veja, red snook, into Parachromis, Catamako, in the garbage. I was kidding. You could use them for other Veja stuff, I guess, but I would say the other stuff holds higher potential because you have the purling and you have possibly a higher fade rate with red Dovi. And you have the unknown aspect of snook. Just be responsible with breeding. Now, I'm showing a lot of information, but responsible. As a hobbyist, it is our responsibility to take care of them. It is our responsibility to take care of the trade, especially with the big platforms shutting down and not selling to us anymore, like Central American Coda. Cichlids of the Americas and Tangled Up in Cichlids. They're not selling. It's our responsibility as breeders to maintain it. If you're a hybrid breeder and you have something rare, breed it pure before you use it as a hybrid. I have Deppies or Pericthi Depi or DB or whatever you want to call it. I have them. I bred them pure. I'm raising out pure fry. And then I use them for hybrids. Because in one market, people don't want muddied up fish. And if I only use them for hybrids and I cull off 80% of the babies because I don't want to sell lower quality stuff, when somebody goes around to buy a Deppy, it's going to be really hard for them because nobody maintained the line. So if you have rare fish, maintain those bloodlines. But at the same time, if you're breeding fish, cull off the ugly stuff. It annoys me the more and more I see breeders try to get around shortcuts with breeding and shortcuts with lower quality fish. Quality in is quality out. At the end of the day, there's no shortcut for success. Almost everything that you really want to do in the hybrid community takes a plan, takes knowledge, and takes the time and energy to get there. That's why the fish are expensive that look like that. Now, if you have any questions about faders, or you want to spitball some ideas with some faders, you can comment on this video. You can text me on Facebook or Instagram. I'll try to get back to you as fast as I can. Liking, sharing, and commenting all help me out. And I think faders as a whole could do a lot better in the community than they are. And I'm going to have more videos coming up soon of amp faders and parrot cichlids, but that's going to be probably in a week or two. So just got to wait for that. But I hope you guys have a great night and hope you enjoyed the video.